When we worry about what might happen in the future, we can default to the worst thing possible. And then, because we dread that worst thing possible, we actually live it before it's arrived. What if there's another possibility? That's the thought behind this week's Sunday question. Hey everyone, I'm Denise Brown and I write what I call Sunday questions. I like to think of a good question in my head so that my mind will seek out a really great answer. My mind does the work for me when I'm feeling stressed, when I feel overwhelmed with worries. I started using this strategy several years ago. It's been so helpful for me, which is why I share it with you. This week's Sunday question is inspired by a coaching call I had with a client last week. She cares for her husband who has Alzheimer's disease, and we've been really connecting to help with coping strategies because she is devastated, understandably so, about his diagnosis and the impact on their lives. She's trying to make her day easier to manage so that she has more energy to manage caregiving responsibilities. So she's in the process of moving them from a big home to a smaller house. During our coaching call, she repeated this strategy to me. It's helpful for her to talk it out. And so she said, okay, so we move from the big house, we find a smaller house, and then at some point we're separated because he goes to a facility. And I said, that's a possibility, but it's not the only possibility. Our coaching calls happen over the phone, but I could see the stress release from her body. It was like her shoulders were hunched up to her ears because she was so stressed out. And I could hear her say, oh. And as she said, oh, it was like her shoulders settled back to where they normally would be. She said, I'd never considered that anything could happen other than we're separated. And I said, that is a possibility. If you're unsafe at home, if he's unsafe at home, or if care needs are too great at home, certainly it could be a possibility that he moves to a facility. It's not the only possibility. And then I shared that I coach other clients who care for a family member with Alzheimer's at home and have continued to do so for years. And again, she said, I just assumed we would be separated. And what was interesting is I had that realization that her dread of being separated impacted today for her. It was like it had already happened. And when I mentioned to her that that is a possibility, it's not the only possibility, it was like the weight of the dread lifted. It was like she was coping with something that hadn't happened yet because the dread was so significant to her. And when she realized there's other possibilities, the dread lifted. She sounded like a different person when our coaching call ended. This idea that we have more than one possibility gives us hope. And that's why it's this week's Sunday question. And this week's Sunday question is, what's another possibility? And here's what I wrote for you. When we consider an outcome to a problem, we often default to one possibility, and often it's the worst case scenario possibility. Before it even happens, we brace for the worst. We may even start to live our life as if the worst has already happened. The worst is a possibility. It's not the only possibility, though. What if we decide we can have more than one possibility? Perhaps we could create three categories of possibilities. With three categories, we can keep our options open and show up in our day present to our moments, rather than living as if the future already arrived with what we don't want. We can live in our day believing in what can be possible. Our categories of possibilities could be: number one, the best case scenario. We can close our eyes and create that best case scenario in our mind. Just visualizing that scenario can reduce the stress of worrying about what will happen. Let's sit back, relax, and create a comforting scene in our mind. Our second category could be the realistic scenario. We can create a scenario that we can live with. It may include pieces from our best case scenario as well as imperfect pieces that we can tolerate. With this scenario, we lift the weight of worry so that we can have more energy to effectively manage this outcome, including its imperfect pieces. A third scenario could be the acceptable scenario. We can develop a scenario that includes compromises so that we can resolve our worry and keep moving forward. We may tolerate more than what we want while giving ourselves space to keep moving forward. We can view this as a temporary outcome, which we revise and tweak as often as possible to reduce what we tolerate and increase what we want. Sometimes a good outcome is to take what helps us move forward rather than keeping what keeps us stuck. To remind us that we can have more than one option, we can begin our day with this question: what's another possibility? What are your possibilities? I'd love for you to share in the comments section. If this resonated with you, hit like. If another could be comforted by the idea of possibilities, share this episode with them. And if you like the content we create, hit subscribe. Thanks for all you do. Thanks for creating possibilities. And thanks so much for listening. I'm Denise Brown.